Alice, come on in, baby. You can sit down here with me and get warm by this fire.
I'm tired after all the work today, Grandma.
Are you? You work that hard, huh? Anytime I feel tired around here, I just think about how much work I had to do to get here, and I'm not tired no more. Coming here, we left Missouri, your grandfather and I, and then not long after, your mama joined us. We had the baby, and we came across the prairies and the mountains and the rivers, and we had the wagon and cattle and cooking and fixing and doing. And when I think about all that work, this just is much more tolerable to be taking care of your own land than to be taking care of somebody else's, trying to get to it.
That sounds exhausting. What did kids do on the trail?
Well, you know, kids gonna be kids, so they did that. They played a lot. But in between their playing, they had chores too. They had to, one of the main things we had the children do, because they was always running and skipping and hopping and carrying on, so we gave them things to do. One thing was they would bring back whatever they could find to help build the fire, so we could have fires for, you know, when it was time to cook or boil up some water for whatever reason. And they would come back and, you know, bring a stick or a tree branch that fell off, and they'd get some moss off the side of a tree. You could use that to help start the fire. And then sometimes we'd be in an area where it wasn't nothing, and they would bring back bison chips.
Chips?
Mm-hmm.
You mean poo?
I mean poo. Mm-hmm.
Ew.
Well, it wasn't too bad. It dried out in the sun and didn't smell too bad, but it would start a fire. And if you need fire, then you use the chip to make a fire.
Why can't you just pack firewood?
Oh, well, baby, firewood weighs a lot. And the way you had to do with your wagon is you could only have a certain number of pounds on the wagon, because you're traveling 2,000 miles, and you can't put but so much weight on your oxen.
For 2,000 miles?
2,000,
and you walked?
yes, we walked the whole way, baby.
Did you have any privy?
No, baby, we didn't have no privy, we didn't have no latrine, we ain't had no nothing. We was just out there, we had trees and grass, and so, you know, you try to find a private space where you can go and do your business. We called it fundamentals, and sometimes the women would make something we called the fundamental circle, and that's when all the women would get in a circle, and they all face out, and their backs to each other, and they hold up the skirt. And that make like a wall, almost like a room, bigger than a privy. And then one woman would go into the middle, and she'd do her business, and when she was done, she'd come out, and the next woman would go in, and we'd just do that until every woman had had their opportunity. And then sometimes we just go find a private place. And for me, sometimes it was more often than not that I was by myself or off privately somewhere, because sometimes I wasn't in the circle.
Why weren't you in the circle, Grandma?
Well, folks was different back then, and I was colored, and the other women was white, and sometimes the white women just didn't want to be in the circle with a colored woman. They didn't want to communicate with a colored woman. They didn't know how. They didn't realize that I was just as much a woman as they were, and so sometimes they didn't want to talk to me, or they didn't want me to be with them. And in those times, I just went on and did what I did, because you can't make nobody like you. You can just do what you do.
What did you do after the Oregon Trail?
Well, we did as much work after the trail as we did on the trail, because then we had to start all over. So we ended up in a little area outside of Corvallis, Oregon, and it was called Soap Creek, just like soap, like you wash up with in a creek. I don't know where the name come from, but Soap Creek. And we looked around and we looked around, and finally your grandfather found this beautiful land. It's 640 acres. And it was just the most beautiful thing. You couldn't stand on one side and see to the other side. I had never seen that much land in one spot. but because we were not legally married. See, you could only have 320 acres per person.
Why?
Well, at that time, colored folk and white folk could not get married. Your Uncle Jack, now he was born in 1849. That's the same year that the Exclusion Laws was put into place.
What is the exclusion law?
Well, baby, Exclusion Laws is basically said that certain people could not live in the territory. And so there was exclusion laws that excluded the coloreds. However, we was already here before they became a territory. And so we did not have to leave. But then your grandfather took ill, and we lost him that year, and things got really bad. This man named Greenberry Smith, he just had to have our land. He took everything out from up under us. It was me and your mama and your Uncle Jack. And he just came in and he took the land and the house. He sold things he didn't even want. He sold furniture. He sold plates. He sold your granddaddy's underwear that I had made with my hand.
His underwear?
His underwear, yes, he did. Now, you know that just ain't right. As we were leaving, I had to give him $100 to buy some of my own things back because he had took it all like it was his. And so I gave him $100 and I bought some of my plates and pots and things back and bought my bed so we could all sleep in something, and you know, got my cows so I could still make some money with my milk and cheese. I was really gonna need it then. But then at some point, after hearing things over here and hearing things over there, I realized I could go to court about what Mr. Smith did. And so I did. I filed 2 lawsuits, 2. Because one thing he was saying was that I wasn't Mr. Carson's wife. And I said, well, if I wasn't his wife, then I must have been his worker, because I sure was doing a lot of work and I sure didn't get no pay for it. And so I sued for my pay. And then I said, but even if I wasn't his wife or his worker, then there was my cows. And so I wanted money for my cows. And we brought in, some people came and testified on my behalf. That means you stand up and you tell what you know. And so people who knew us from Missouri, and who knew us on the trail, and who knew us in Oregon, they all came and they stood in front of the judge and they said, yes, yeah, that was her cow, and yes, she made butter and cheese, and yes, she built the house, and yes, and they just yes and yes and yes. And finally the judge said, well, this must be true. And so I won both of those lawsuits. And so I got money back for them cows that man stole from us, and I got money back as if I had been your grandfather's employee. And so I had almost $2,000, girl. That was a lot of money. So then, not long after I won the case and had a little bit of money, then there was something called the Homestead Act. And the Homestead Act basically said if you live someplace for 5 years and you tended that someplace for 5 years, then that someplace become yours. And so we moved on that property and we put up this little house we're sitting in right here. And we put out that orchard that's out there, all them trees. Yes, we did, your mama and your uncle. And we planted and we worked, and now we have our own. And can't nobody take it. You know why? My name is on it. It say Letitia Carson. That's my name. And they can't take it because it's ours. It's going to be ours. Can't nobody steal it. And what you think about that?
Remarkable.
I think you remarkable. Now go to bed.